Hey guys, Jason here with RWB NetSec. I just wanted to say quickly, just starting out, for everybody who celebrated last week, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving holiday. I took a little bit of a break for the holidays, but now we're back at it and we'll start putting out some more tutorial videos. So in the one that we're doing today, we're going to be looking at another information gathering tool called Sparta. So Sparta is kind of a unique tool. It's basically a conglomeration of a bunch of other tools that are all managed by a single interface. It's meant to help pen testers during the scanning and enumeration phases of a pen test. So when you give it a host to scan, it actually runs several other tools in the background, such as InMap and Nikto, and then it will display all that output in the one user interface. So the cool thing is that if you wanted to change how a particular tool runs, you can change Sparta's configuration file. So for example, say you wanted to add the use of an NSE script to the Nmap scans. You can just simply set that in the config file, and then Sparta will use those settings on all of its future runs. So you can also add new tools, especially if there's a particular tool that you like to use on your tests and it's not in use in Sparta already. Then you can add that tool's information to the config file, and now you have access to it through Sparta's interface. So I think it's really a neat idea for a tool, and the way it's configured makes it easy for you to make the changes in the way it runs just by adding a couple of lines to one single configuration file. So the authors have also stated that doing it by the configuration file it can be a bit tedious, I guess, depending on the changes that you're going to make. Their plans are to add a settings menu within the program to give you a place to go in and make these changes without having to mess with that config file. Because if you mess up any of the lines in that file, you could cause some of the tools not to run properly. So just keep that in mind when you start messing around with this. So that's just kind of a brief overview of what the tool is. Now let's go ahead and take kind of a deeper dive into how it works. Alright, so let me go ahead and we'll just minimize that window. Now within Kali, to launch Sparta, you just go to Applications, Information Gathering, and then go down to Sparta. And you can see when you launch it, you have two windows that open. You have this terminal window that opens. It's kind of like a running log file that will show you the actions that Sparta is taking as you're running it. And then you have this main window here. Let's pull this over quick. So we'll just start. I'm just going to start from the top here and just start going through what you're presented with. We'll start with the file menu. So of course, new will let you open a new project. Open will let you open any saved Sparta projects that you might have. Of course, save and save as are self-explanatory. You've got add host to scope, and this lets you add your target IP address or a range of IPs. This import Nmap will let you import an Nmap XML file. So for example, if you've already run an Nmap scan on a target and you've saved your results as an XML file, you can then import that file into Sparta and then be able to run all the other tests that Sparta offers from there. One thing to mention quick, this help feature does not seem to be working. If you click on it, at least on my version, I don't know if maybe some of you other guys have seen this, but nothing ever loads when I click on help here. So I'm not sure. It might be a compatibility issue, something screwy with the way Kali 2 works with this program. It doesn't really matter though, because there's plenty of help online. So it's not a big deal. And the program is easy enough itself to figure out how to use. So that's not really that big of a deal. So now we'll just kind of move down here to the scan tab. And you'll see underneath it, it has these three sub-tabs. You've got hosts, which if you can click on it here, and this is where you can enter your IP address or range. And it shows you the examples, the different formats that you can enter your information in. So you can either use CIDR format, you can specify a range of IP addresses, or you can just enter a single host in there. You can also have it set to let InMap do a host discovery, or you can set it to a staged InMap scan. And I'll kind of talk about this a little bit later as we get to running this. This is kind of the default behavior with Sparta, and it actually makes it faster to get your results back if you use the stage scan. So let's just cancel this here. If you go to the services tab, of course there's not going to be anything here yet, but this is where the discovered services for your target hosts are going to show up. So you'll see a listing here of maybe HTTP or FTP or SSH, just anything that's found on your target host as the scans are running. This tools tab in this window here is where as the tools run, so for example Nmap or Hydra, those will show up here, and you can click on each one and the results from that tool then will show up in these windows. So then if we go over to the brute tab, this is where you can set up your brute force password settings. So you would give it the IP address of your host, set the port that you're going against and the service, and you can see it has quite a lengthy list of services that you can attack. So for example, if we wanted to try to brute force an FTP account, set that to FTP, change the port to 21 here. For these other settings, I pretty much leave these as default. And then here you've got three different options basically of how you can set it for the usernames and passwords. This first grouping here, if you already know the username of an account, you can specify that here. By default, Sparta already fills this in as root and password. You can also change it to use a username and password list. So you could set those options, do a browse, and then point it to the list that you want to use. Or you could set it to this third option here of found usernames and passwords. And what this would be is as you're running the tools, if they've already found other accounts, then those will show up here, and that's what it will use to brute force. You can also do kind of a combination. Say that you already found a username for one of the services, but you don't have the password. So you could set this username here, put the found username here, and then you could come down here and specify a password list to use against that account. So once you get everything set here, you would just come up here and click on run, and then it'll start trying to brute force attack those password accounts. And as it's running, everything's going to show up down here in this log window. So that's pretty much it as far as the basic options that are available to you. So we'll start looking at actually running a scan with it now. But before we do anything, there's one change that I want to make to the config file for Sparta. By default, when you add a host in here, it's automatically going to start running all of its pre-configured scans. So it's going to start running InMap scans. I think it runs Nikto. It'll run QtCapt to try to get screenshots of websites. All that's going to automatically fire up as soon as you add your host in here, which is probably not a good idea. Because that's the thing to keep in mind. This is an active scan. So you're actually going against a target when you're doing this. So if you're running all of this stuff at the same time, it's not exactly going to be stealthy on your target's network. So you may want to break it up and just do maybe one or two tools at a time. So to change that behavior, if we open up, it's not there. We need to open up the Sparta configuration file, which is located under user share Sparta, and then you have this sparta.conf file. So if we open that up here, and I've already got the setting changed, but if you scroll up here at the very top under general settings, this enable scheduler setting is the one you want to change, and in your config file this will be set to true. So you'll want to come in here and just change that to false, and then make sure that you save the file. Let's close that out and minimize this. Now for yours, since I've already got it changed, I don't need to do anything, but anytime that you make a change to the Sparta config file, you need to restart Sparta in order for it to take the changes. Otherwise, it's not going to work the way you set it. So just when you go in and make that change, close Sparta out and then reopen it again, and you should be good to go. Setting that scheduler like that just kind of gives you more control over how your scans are going to take place. It's still going to run the Nmap scan when you add your host to it, but the other tools are not going to launch until you tell them to. Alright, so to get started with a scan, the only thing that we need to do is add a target. And for this tutorial, I've got a Metasploitable VM also running, and that's what I'm going to run all of my scans against. So you can select any target that you've got available in your lab. So when you go here, for this one I'm just going to type in the IP address of my Metasploitable machine, and I'm going to uncheck for the InMap host discovery because I already know the host. I don't need to find it again. So, and remember, just leave this staged InMap scan checked, and then we'll click on add to scope. And you can see as soon as I do that, the InMap scan starts, and it is showing as a staged scan. So basically what this is, and you can actually see this in the config file if you open it back up. Just look at this while the scans are running. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Under the staged InMap settings, you can see the type of scan that InMap is going to run on each phase of its scan. So the stage 1 is only going to do ports 80 and 443. Stage 2 then adds additional ports, and it's also going to do some common UDP ports here. Or stage 3 is going to add a few more ports, and so on. So doing it this way, it actually lets you get results back faster than waiting for it to scan through the entire 65,535 ports at one time. So let's just close this out again. Let's see where we are here. So you can see it lists each stage. Excuse me. And it gives you the status here of if that stage has been finished or not. And you can see here we have our host showing, and then here are all the ports and services that it has found so far with the InMap scan, which with Metasploitable you can expect there to be quite a few ports open here. So we can just let this run for a minute. Alright, so the way that you get the additional tools to run, all you need to do is go to one of the services, and just right click on it, and you're going to have this context menu that comes up with a list of options that are available for that particular service. And each one is going to be different. So you see I clicked on port 25 for SMTP, and it gives you the options to enumerate SMTP using these methods. We can also, if we go to the FTP port and right click on it, you can see that the settings change for it. You can actually open it with an FTP client, check for default FTP credentials. So that's the way each of these is going to work. We're going to look at this port 80 for HTTP. You right click on it, and you can see the options now that we've got. We could open it in a browser to see what the page looks like. We can take a screenshot, which Sparta uses QtCapt to do the screenshots for this. And I've actually done another video on QtCapt, so if you haven't seen that yet, take a look at it when you get a chance. You can run WhatWeb, Nikto. One thing that I wanted to note here, and this is a Kali 2 specific, I don't know if it's necessarily an issue, but Kali 2 does not have WebSlayer installed. And from what I could tell, it's not available in their repositories to install. It was available in Kali 1, and it's probably in Backtrack. But for some reason, WebSlayer is not included with Kali 2.0. So just keep that in mind. If you try to launch WebSlayer from Sparta, it's going to crash a process, and it's going to hang up on you. So just don't mess with that. And you can see we could also launch Dirbuster here. So we're actually going to run Nikto against it. So if we just click on that, and you can see we've got a new process that started here for Nikto. And we have a new tab that's open now. So if we click on it, we can see the information that Nikto is bringing back. And it's all kept in its own tab, and then it shows you which port it's going against. So we're on port 80. Just to show you what this terminal window looks like. It's just keeping a track of what you're doing within Sparta. So you could reference that maybe if you need to troubleshoot something. Alright, so the Nikto scan is finished. You can see the information that it's discovered. So now if we click on the Tools tab, we can see Nikto is listed here. It shows the target that we went against, and then it just displays the information here. It's the same as what we see on this tab. So in addition to being able to run something like Nikto against it, we could go back to the services again, and we can launch a Netcat session with port 80. And if we pull that up here, so now we've got a new terminal window that's open with a Netcat connection to port 80 on our target host. So now we could just come in here and do a head HTTP 1.0, and now we can just pull back the header information from the web server, and then we can see which version of web server it's running. So this is just another way to gather information to verify maybe what one of the other tools has brought back in its results. And you can see there's, I mean, we could have done Telnet with it as well. If we do open browser, it's just going to open our browser to our target host, and you can see this is the main page that comes up for it. So you can do this functionality on any of the services that are discovered. I'll just show you quick the options that show up for MySQL. You can see that you can connect with the MySQL client. You can check for default credentials, and you can send them to the brute forcing section to try to get account information for it. So it's a pretty cool tool to use. So let's go ahead and select one of these other services here. Let's just do FTP. You can see the options that we've got here. We looked at those just a minute ago, but we can, we could use Netcat or Telnet. We can connect with an FTP client, send a brute force, etc. We're going to use the brute forcing method to see what we can do here, to see if we can get any account information. So if we click on send to brute, and then we come up here to this brute tab, and we can set our options. You can see that it's already got our target address set in it. It's got the port we're going against and the service. As I said before, we're just going to leave these options as default here, and I'm going to set this to use a username and password list. So if I just do browse here, I think I saved these on my desktop. Let's see. Word list maybe? Yeah. So these are just lists I created for this specific tutorial. You can use whatever list you've got available. And we'll go back and password list. And then once you get these things set, all you need to do is click on run. And you can see it's finished already, and it uses Hydra to do the password brute forcing. So you can see here it did find an account for anonymous, and it tells you that one target was completed and one valid password found. And like I said, you can do this same thing against any of the other services that will allow you to try to brute force passwords against them. Now at some point while you're running through all these tools, getting all these results back, you're going to want to save your files, save your Sparta session. So you can do that by, if you just come up here and click on file, and we'll do a save as, and I'm just going to save it in a Sparta folder that I made on the desktop. I'll just do Sparta demo, and it's going to save everything as a Sparta project file, and I'll show you what that looks like here when we save it. So just click on save. And now if I go into the folder here, it creates two different objects here. We have the main Sparta SPRT. This is your main project file. And it also creates this folder. And if you go inside this folder, you can see additional folders for each of the tools that were run during your session. So if we go into each of these files, then you can see it contains all of the results from that particular tool. So you can see with your Nmap, you have your XML files. If we go into Nikto, it saves it as a text file. So if you open that up, you can see, and this is just everything that we saw in our results screen from earlier. Of course, the Hydra results. You can see this actually shows the command that Hydra used when it ran against the FTP service. And all this information is contained within that Sparta configuration file. So then once you have everything saved, if you needed to come back to it later, and say you maybe got busy, you had to go outside of Sparta to do some other task or something, you could come back, and then to reload that particular project, you would just go to File and Open, and then point it to that project file, and it will load everything back up for you here, and you can continue working on it from there if you need to run additional tools or whatever you need to do with it. So another thing that I wanted to show you is how you can add a host for scanning using the import Nmap feature. So let me do a new project here. So I've already got an XML file saved from an Nmap scan that I did. So if I just do go to File and Import Nmap, and I believe I saved it just under root here. Sparta.xml file, and I open it up. And you can see that it imported all the information that was contained within my Nmap scan. So that's pretty easy to do. Not a lot to explain with this one, but it's just convenient if you've already run Nmap against your target and you've already got some results with it. Then you can just import that, and it'll save you a little bit of time with Sparta because it's not going to have to run that Nmap stage scans before you do anything else with it. Alright, so kind of the last thing that I wanted to talk about was modifying the config file to add your own tools to it. Just one thing that you need to remember with this, the tool that you add, if it's a command line tool, it cannot be an interactive tool, which means that you can't start that tool running and then it stop waiting for user input. It has to be something that can you can just specify the options to run the tool with and then let it run and complete. So just keep that in mind as you're experimenting with this and adding new tools to it. So the one that I'm going to add here is xprobe2. Let me show you real quick. If you go and right click on the host, it gives you a couple of options here. So you can do port scans, etc. When we add xprobe2 to Sparta, it should show up as another option under this context menu. So we'll see if this works out okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out Sparta since we're going to be changing the config file. Yes, I want to close. And I'm just going to close this terminal window. And if I go back and open the Sparta config file, the first place that I'm going to go is under this tool settings. I'm just going to add another entry here. And we'll just call it xprobe2. And we'll set it just going to copy the syntax just exactly like the other ones are set up. So that's going to be located under user bin xprobe2. Then the next it would be alright if I could talk today. The next section we need to look at is this host actions section. So I'm just going to come under here and I'm going to add a new line. And this first parameter that you add in, this is the name that's going to show up when you right click on that context menu. I'm sorry, this is the description of the host action itself. So I'm just going to do OS detect. So xprobe2 is designed to try to detect the operating system that's on a given target. That's its specialty, I guess, if you will. So this next parameter that we're adding in, this is what's going to show up on the context menu. So I'm just going to call it OS fingerprint. Try not to make these too long. We'll do a comma and then a space, and then this last parameter that we add in, this is the actual command that we would use at the command line to run the program. So it's going to be xprobe2. I'm not going to add any additional options. I'm just going to give it doing an IP like this enclosed within these square brackets. This just means it's a placeholder. So when you launch this tool, it's going to pull the IP address from the host information that Sparta already has. So that's all we need to add. Let's go ahead and save it, close the config file, and then we'll go back and launch Sparta again. And I'm just going to import that Nmap file that I had, so I don't have to run through scans again. So now if we come up here and right click on the host, you can see that now we've got this xprobe2 option. So if I click on that, It's going to show down here that process is running, and then you can see that it created a new tab for Xprobe. And these are the results, and these are the same results that you would see if you just opened a terminal window and ran Xprobe outside of Sparta. So that's a pretty neat feature to be able to add your own tools into it. Just remember about the command line tools, that they cannot be an interactive session, and anytime you make changes to that config file, you're going to need to restart Sparta in order for it to pick up those changes. So just keep that in mind as you're messing around with this. So guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Sparta is a pretty cool tool to use, especially with the fact that you can modify it and add other tools as you need them. And just keep in mind, as I said before, that this is considered active scanning, so you're actually going against a target when you use this tool. So be sure that you have permission from your target before you fire this off against them. We could have spent a lot more time, I guess, running things against all these other hosts, but that's something that you can play around with. I think you get the general idea of how it works. Just right-clicking on a service, and then you can select other options within here that you want to run against that particular service. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. As always, hope you guys have an awesome day. Thanks for watching. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If it's your first time here, I would love if you subscribe to the channel and share it out with all of your friends. So my hope is to build a community where we can help each other learn and grow in security, especially if you're just getting into it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And again, thanks for watching. I hope you all have an awesome day. See you guys.